For someone like me, born and raised in London, I believe genuinely London is the best city in the world. My parents came here in the 60s from Pakistan. And when you compare and contrast their peers who went to Paris or Berlin or Rome or Brussels, and you compare and contrast the progress my parents and their children made, people who look like me, people who have the beliefs that I do, compare and contrast to people who look like me and have my beliefs in those other cities, we've done the best in this city. And one of the reasons why we have is because the person who's been responsible for improving the quality of lives of people who look like me, who have my beliefs, who sound like me, whose dad drove a London Transport bus for more than 25 years, who was born on a council estate, it's because this man, Ken Livingstone. You know, people will talk, rightfully so, about what he did as mayor, improving our buses, they're the best in the world, improving our tubes, getting us the Olympics, the Oyster card, the congestion charge. People will talk about that, and that's fine, that's good. It's really important we do so on the doorstep. What people don't talk about is the work Ken did taking on the National Front when it wasn't popular to do so, taking on the BNP when it wasn't popular to do so, talking about how it's outrageous that young black kids and Muslim kids are stopped and searched too much when it was unpopular to do so. Ken talked about racism and Islamophobia when it wasn't popular to do so. He talked about the Iraq War and how wrong that was when it wasn't popular to do so. He talked about Guantanamo Bay and how outrageous that is when it wasn't popular to do so. He talked about why we need to have equalities law and make all of us feel equal and be treated equally when it wasn't popular to do so. He campaigned to outlaw discrimination in the workplace when people are discriminated on the grounds of their religion when it wasn't popular to do so. He campaigned for my constituents, Barbara Ahmed and Saeed Talha Hassan, and it still isn't popular to do so, but he does it because it's the right thing to do, and that's why we should support him on Thursday in the elections. Now, I've got to tell you this. There are only two people that are going to win on Thursday. It's the Conservative Mayor, Boris Johnson, and he's a Conservative, or Ken Livingstone. And Boris has spent the last few hours, days, weeks and months pretending he's not a Tory. But I'm quite old-fashioned. If you sound like a Tory, you act like a Tory, you're a Tory. Did you know Boris Johnson earned £1.5 million over the last 4 years and thinks his chicken feed to earn £250,000. Did you know Boris Johnson, as Mayor of London, has cut 1,200 police officers and thinks it's okay to do so? Did you know the #1 priority of Boris Johnson over the last 20 months has been reducing the top rate of tax for those who earn £150,000, and he's succeeded in doing so? Did you know there's only one person that can beat him, Ken Livingstone?
I look about and I have to say, and I don't know if you all feel it, but I'm feeling pretty fired up in advance of next week. And I'm not just feeling fired up, I'm feeling proud. I look around today, and I know a lot of you would have been out in the driving, freezing rain today, pounding those doorsteps. And sometimes it's often a depressing and exhausting experience. But you know when you get home that you're part of a movement, and that is what we are, a movement. And however the Conservatives dress themselves up, whatever logo they use, they can use a tree, they can use a pair of fluffy bunnies for all I care, but they are a political gravy train for the people at the top, and that is always what we're up against. It's what they've always been, and it's what they'll always be. Now, I want to talk about Tory Britain, and I want to talk about Tory Britain because Boris Johnson, however, again, he clothes himself, is a pillar of Tory Britain, this Conservative mayor that I'm ashamed as a Londoner we are currently governed by. Now, I don't know if you remember before the election, Labour mocked up David Cameron as Gene Hunt from Life on Mars, smugly perching on an Audi Quattro. And at the top, the slogan was, "Don't let him take us back to the 1980s. How wrong we were. This economic crisis we're now in is far worse than the 1980s. It's worse than the last double-dip recession in the 1970s because the drop in growth is far more. It's worse than the 1930s because the projections for our recovery are far longer than it took in the 1930s. We are now in the most protracted economic crisis since the 1870s in the Long Depression. That is what the poison of austerity has done to this country. Now, I have to say, it is a very serious recession, but it doesn't look that way at the top. I don't know if people saw today, the Sunday Times does a rich list every single year. Their wealth went up by 5% this year. Last year, it went up by nearly a fifth. The year before that, it went up by 30%. It's the biggest surge in wealth that rich list has ever recorded. Compare and contrast to everybody else. We have now hard-working Londoners, low-paid Londoners, being thrown out of their homes because of the cuts to housing benefit by this government. We have nurses, teachers, bin collectors who face a real terms pay cut by the next election of 16%. We have some of the poorest sixth form students in this country who have had their educational maintenance allowance confiscated from them. It is boom time for the people at the top, but for everybody else, it is a very serious economic crisis, and that is what Tory Britain has brought to us. Now, if people want a champion, a fighter, a campaigner for those people at the top, they've got him. They've got their man. It's Boris Johnson. He's found his injustices to fight against, the scrapping of the 50p tax for the top 1% at the top, calling bankers, railing about how they're being persecuted as lepers. But they've got another choice. They want a champion, a fighter, a campaigner for everybody else. They've got him on the front row here, and that is Ken Livingstone.
My name is Rakeem Yas. I'm a youth worker. I've been in education for the last 12 years, 6 years as a mentor, 6 years as a teacher, 5 years as a head of year. And I know that education is in problems. Education is in problems, and the young people need help. Okay? And this is why I think Ken would be great to bring back help for the young people. I know my son has just started university now, and I know it's hard on me. It's very, very hard, but he will get through, and we hope that all the young people will have a better mayor in place. I'm sick and tired of all the violence in the raps, all the talk about the straps, busting caps on the chaps. I'm sick and tired of all the post-Cold Wars, fighting over concrete. The government owns those streets, they're not yours. I'm sick and tired of all the gangster culture, fast money, fast women, fast cars. It's all material wealth. You think you're a big man because you're rolling with the Lex, blacked out windows, private number plate. But who did you kill to get that number plate? And how much skin did you pierce with the shank and penetrate? Peddling poison produces a mass murderer. Get quick schemes, many young boys fiends. But many people, they get to the top and they drop in the fast lane. You think you're on top, that it's your time to get popped. You think you're on top, that it's your time to get dropped. You think you're on top, that it's your time to get stopped. So you're banged up, slammed up, under key and lock.
My name is Ibrahim Sincere. I'm a young poet from London. The piece I'm about to do is called Unchained, and it is a representation of my feelings and my views as a young Londoner. And I also believe that it is a representation of many of the views of the other young Londoners. In my dreams, I can't wait, cause we demand change. In my dreams, I can't wait, cause we demand change. In my dreams, I can't wait, cause we demand change. I've been lost in a cage made of bars I can't see. Been a slave to a system that assures me I'm free, but I guess there was a definition error. What does freedom really mean in a mental prison era? I got a box in my house and it tells me what I need. Scared of being different, that's subliminal terror. So I chase this mirage, it leads me into a cellar. Prison clothes from an advert, inside I feel no better man. Where did humanity go? Trapped within a value that a salary shows. On a check that doesn't tell you if there's happiness at home. Plus there's kids across the sea raising families alone. So I say we rise from this plane, and if I told you we could fly, would you tell me I'm crazy? Stuck in a sleep, I can't wake. In my dreams, I can't wait, cause we cannot change. And I'm no longer caged, I'm a soul unchained. I await elevation, fly with my brain. And I'm no longer lost, I be turning to God. With wings made of teardrops, I fly far away. And I'm no longer caged, I'm a soul unchained. I await elevation, fly with my brain. And I'm no longer lost, I be turning to God. With wings made of teardrops, I fly far away. So this a town of democracy, all I see are cameras, full of suits in this economy, but all look like animals. Banks committing robberies, but coppers search the average. Coloured kid, fitted cap, anything to hassle him, we don't give in to the stereotype. Knowledge is power, now they're scared of our minds. The history's a skeleton, they bury their crimes. A revolution is coming and they're scared of the signs. In the lair of your lies, hysteria lies, and even handcuffed, I still put a prayer to the sky. I'ma die soon. I just hope my message survives, that the youth have a gift, and it's the present of time. So I'm young with a zealous mind. All I know is love, I got no mind for the selfish. I'm stuck in a sleep, I can't wake. In my dreams, I can't wait, cause
this is the most important election that Ken has ever fought. Because we are going into this election in the middle of a recession, and we may be facing a slump that lasts years, and it will be a recession and a slump that will hit London, particularly young Londoners, BME Londoners and women, particularly hard. And so this election isn't about Ken, as we've heard. This election is about the future of ordinary Londoners in the midst of one of the worst economic crises that London and the South East has faced since the 30s. And some people will tell you, some people may have told you, you've been out, oh, Boris, he's such a card, he makes me laugh. But in the middle of recession, London has never needed a Labour mayor more. And you have to tell people when they tell you about Boris and his jokes, do you really want to wake up on Friday and know that London has elected a Tory mayor under a Tory government? That would be to put London between an anvil and a hammer. I believe, as the Member of Parliament for Hackney North, that Ken has the policies that are vital for ordinary Londoners. I would single out his policy to bring back the educational maintenance allowance. People don't understand what that meant. It meant more, to be frank, than the whole tuition fee stuff to my young people in Hackney, because they needed that money. They needed that money to get to college. They needed that money to help their mum pay bills. And that money, you know, taking away that money was like a slap in the face, because these were the young people who were trying to do their best, trying to do what they were told to do. And they were slapped in the face by this cabinet of millionaires. And for us in Hackney, bringing back the EMA is one of the most important policies that Ken will pursue. But it's the most important election that he has ever fought, because in the middle of a recession, what do you always see? You see the rise of fascism, racism, and anti-Semitism. And in these conditions, we need the leadership that Ken can provide. It's not just that Ken stood up on race and anti-Semitism when it wasn't fashionable. He stood up on those issues when you were abused for standing up on those issues. Ken stood up for gay rights, for black rights, for women's equality, when you were abused, when you were called mad, when you were called odious. And we have all lived to see that even David Cameron claims to be in favour of these things now. But we need Ken's leadership on these issues, because he's been unflinching on these issues for over 30 years. It's the most important election he'll ever fight because of the future of young Londoners. It's the most important election he'll ever fight because we need his leadership on racial justice and equality and anti-Semitism. But it's the most important election he'll ever fight because we are at a pivotal moment when it comes to national politics. The scales are just beginning to drop from people's eyes about this cabinet of millionaires. It's beginning to dawn on people. It's not just that the cuts are bad, 80% of the cuts haven't hit yet. What will happen when the full impact of those cuts hit communities across London and across the country? And it's beginning to dawn on people that that lovely George Osborne has no plan B and plan A is not working.
And there's two things I know are true about Ken. Do you know, Ken knows every square inch of this city. And actually, Ken loves this city with his whole heart, and actually he loves and cares for the people of London. So can I introduce to you, without any further ado, Labour's candidate, our candidate for mayor, Ken Livingstone.
Thank you very much. No. Thank you. Thanks very much. There, I've done it. Well, thanks very much for all those kind and embarrassing words. I want to start by thanking, because I have to say it's a lot more fun when you have an election and the weather's sunny every day. It seems like almost every day in this election, wherever you are, it has rained, there have been cold winds, but we've had the most determined campaign, the most pervasive campaign, reaching into every section of London that we've seen since the landslide in '97. We found over 1 million pledges for Labour. We found more Labour voters in Bromley than we've ever recorded before. The same is true of Kingston. All over, the party has come together. A vast amount has been done. He says he wants to build up a sense of neighbourliness and duty towards each other. Well, I see no advance in that under his mayoralty. His mayoralty has been completely and utterly about withdrawing from engaging. We used to bring all Londoners together for the Rise Festival, the biggest anti-racist festival, anti-Semitic anti-Semitism festival, anti-Islamophobia festival. We brought everybody together, and we filled Finsbury Park year after year. We actually shifted the day to Sunday in response to a request from the Board of Deputies. It was the most unifying thing. He stopped it. Right the way across, all the things we've done, it's been wound back, wound down, and where is the presence of City Hall bringing people together in this city? It isn't. All we've had is a completely divisive, negative, mudslinging campaign. What we've got to do is get across to people in these last few days. It really isn't about jokes. It's about whether you really want to put in place the things that make this a better and a safer and a more tolerant city for the people in this city, or whether it's just about a focus of shifting resources to the top 1%. This mayor has met bankers more than he has met the police organisation he's supposed to be responsible for. As well as all this nonsense, taking off 2 weeks whilst we had the riots, whilst we had a major upheaval and disruption on an underground line virtually every other day. And where's the denunciation in the press? Can you imagine what would have been said if I'd taken a couple of months off while I was mayor? I'd have been driven out of office by a torrent of press abuse. There seems to be one standard for these Eton boys, and they've all been at the same public schools, the same universities. They run the media, they own the media, and there's a complete double standard that runs through all of this. And what we've got to do is focus in these last 4 campaigning days on getting across those key messages that are important. I don't need to go through the pledges we've made about cutting the fares, bringing back the EMA, restoring police numbers. You know that's what you'd expect any Labour administration to do. It's about helping people get through the worst economic circumstances since the 1930s. And what this mayor has done, he hasn't campaigned around any of that. He hasn't brought in new initiatives to put people back to work or to redistribute wealth to the poorest. He spent the last 2 years campaigning to persuade George Osborne and David Cameron to cut the top rate of tax for the richest 1%. And what's interesting about this, we still remain the 6th or 7th richest country in the world. And it's not that we don't have money, it's just that it's being redistributed away. I mean, that Sunday Times rich list is absolutely stunning. We've just been through the worst 4 years of our economy since the 1930s, and the very elite richest have seen their wealth soar, whilst people have been thrown out of work, people have seen their wages cut, people have seen the services they relied on, the benefits they expected to get. And that tax cut for the richest 1% paid for by 500,000 pensioners and low-income families either losing their benefits or having to pay more tax to make up the money that went to the richest. It's not that we haven't got money in this country, it's actually that it's been redistributed into the hands of a small elite. The more inequality in a society, the worse teenage pregnancy, drug addiction, mental illness, all of those things. And in that last 30 years, both in Britain and America, inequality of wealth has doubled. We've gone back to where we were in World War I, in the times of an aristocracy, in the times before the majority of people were even allowed to vote. That's the reality. We have rolled back, and this election is a beginning of a turning point. And we start to change that and lay the foundations for returning this country to something much fairer. This is not a party that seeks to represent all London's diversity or an equal balance in terms of gender. And having that Val as deputy sends a powerful message. But also Val is there to actually run Transport for London. She will be the person driving through the fares cut, turning round the decline in our public transport, because it is beginning to decline. I don't know what you feel about the buses. They seem a bit more crowded, a bit more erratic. And of course, when I was elected, we had 5,500 clapped out old buses. We got a completely new fleet of 8,000. But we were increasing that fleet. Given the increase in population in London, given the increase in public transport, the number of riders on the bus went up 50%. You should have had 9,000 buses by now. And all, of course, all the money went on, how many is it, Val? 5 or 8 Boris buses? 8 buses for £1.5 million each, you know. It is bizarre. I mean, now, I have to say, we're not going to be vindictive. If we win, we're not going to scrap the buses. I mean, they will continue, these 8 most expensive buses in the world, to run on routes. We want people to know about it, though. I think we'll have up on the side the most expensive bus in the world, courtesy of Boris Johnson. When I became mayor in 2000, business was saying, London doesn't work. It's too congested. It's a nightmare. And of course it hadn't. For 14 years, we'd had no city government since Thatcher abolished the GLC. And we turned it round in 8. But unless the mayors who are elected are planning for the future, come 2020, we'll have that same cry, people saying this city isn't working, it's too congested, the transport's completely chock-a-block, there's terrible problems with housing. You have to be planning now, and that's what we'll do. It won't get the immediate great attention, but it means this city will function a decade down the line. This is a crucial election, as several of the previous speakers said. It's a turning point election, and it's a turning point in the whole history of our country. And these turning points come once or twice in a lifetime. 1945, in the election of a Labour government, was such a turning point. A government was elected when we had debts 3 times the size of the present government debt. That government put Britain back to work, created the most advanced welfare state the world had ever seen, an NHS which remains the most cost-effective healthcare system in the world, and it set in train a broadly social democratic consensus that even Tory governments couldn't roll back. And then the second turning point of my life was 1979 and Thatcher, the neoliberal agenda. Roll back the state, deregulate the banks, reduce the tax on the richest and the corporations. And you remember the line, the whole economy will be set free, it will all rise, and there will be a trickle-down effect for the poorest people from the elite at the top. And it's interesting because we can look back on over 30 years of that neoliberal agenda, both here and in America. We never achieved the levels of investment in our economy. We never achieved the growth in GDP in our economy that we did in that dreadful period of social democratic consensus in the 30 years after the war. And what has now happened with slipping back into this double-dip recession is this is the point where we demonstrate that to people, where we challenge the mantra of Osborne and Cameron that this is all just a debt that was built up by the last Labour government. It was 30 years of wrong economic strategy. We allowed the banks to dominate our economy. Just look across the North Sea at Germany. In Germany, unemployment's half the level here. Why? Their banks never became the master of the German economy. They invested in modernising their industry. They still export manufactured goods to China, which, given the wage differential, is stunning. They still have good jobs for working-class people who are getting a good technical education in school. They are still making something that somebody else wants to buy. They don't wait for it to trickle down from the banks. And we could have done the same. There is one bit of our manufacturing that Thatcher saved, as the rest was destroyed: armaments. Supported by the state, government subvention, and we remain one of the 3 most advanced manufacturers of weaponry. So I know we're all knackered, I'm knackered, but in these next 4 days, we need every tube and train and bus station in London with Labour people outside handing out the leaflets saying what we're going to do with fares. We need on that day every single one of the million Labour promises knocked on the door, phoned, brought out to vote. It isn't just about winning an election. It's about changing the direction of all humankind. Thank you very much.